So, welcome to the Transspatial Tavern's book launch for Sarah J. Daley's Obsidian. Miss Daley's book came out in January 25th to rave reviews, and this is our chance to celebrate Sarah and the book. So, I'd like to introduce to you Sarah J. Daley, author.
Getting quite a lesson today. The light stopped just a few inches from them, and Shade stepped back from it. She couldn't enter the Karaz, not like her adoptive kin. This was a Galandrina skill alone, a holdover from their ancient blood. Once they had worshipped and protected all the spirits of the land, the Lacorum. At the center of the circle of light, Jolene opened her eyes. They gleamed golden. "Bring the children to me," she said, her voice resonating, "and anyone who cannot fight. The rest of you, listen to our witch." Quickly, with hushed tones, the Galandrina sent their children into the light. The few mothers with infants entered as well. As Shade watched, the youngsters sank into the pool as if it really were water. It swirled about their necks as they stared pensively back at their parents. Jolene sank slowly until she was waist deep. She met Shade's eyes, a warning in her ancient gaze. "I'll keep them here as long as it is safe." Shade nodded. The Galandrina tended the Karaz. They were the reason the magic stayed clean and strong, but it cost them. The Karaz fed on their power. Like shedding blood for one's magic, there was only so much any one Galandrina could give. She would have to do everything in her power to see this storm dissipate quickly. "Cyril, Manoli, Petra," she called, "to me. The rest of you, add your power to the circles of protection. Give all you can. Remember what's at stake." It was unnecessary to remind them. She saw it clearly in their faces. Even if none of the children in the Well of Power were directly related to them by blood, they were all one clan. Losing a single soul was unacceptable. The men and women scattered, placing themselves outside the ring of carts. Each would use their lone quartz blade to draw upon their magic. Alone, none of them could master any face above air, but together, bound by their shared ancestry, they could touch each element but for spirit, and form a temporary shield around the camp. Only Shade could touch the hidden face, and she would need spirit to battle the worst of the creatures the storm would bring. "Stay close to Jolene," she ordered Raiden, tossing the command over her shoulder as she dashed away, Cyril and the boys on her heels. They raced to the southern edge of camp, placing themselves in the direct path of the black storm. It was already obscuring the stars as it rose like a mountain against the night sky. Light flickered across its face, lightning stained red and orange and deep pink. Streaks of power blasted outward from the towering clouds, striking the earth and blowing up great gouts of dirt and rocks. Though the storm itself was as black as the lowest hells, a strange light lit up the wastes, enough to see a wave of ravening creatures tearing across the ground toward them. "Catch any that get past me," she said, breathless with fear and excitement. The energies of the black storm crackled in the air around them. It smelled of sulfur and rotten meat, of death and putrescence. "We've faced worse than this, boss," Manoli said, grinning as he had been since the moment she told them they wouldn't be running. Beside him, Petra flashed a brief smile and gave an encouraging nod. Concern lurked in his eyes, and she knew exactly what had him so worried. He would die before he let a child come to harm. "We won't let a single beast get past us," Petra said fiercely. "Get yourselves ready," Cyril growled to his nephews. He'd already stripped away his shirt and had his blade drawn. The others followed suit, his eyes narrowing beneath his bushy brows. He bent close to Shade's ear. "You aren't really going to call the wild power, are you?" She grimaced. "I've avoided it so far, old man. I don't plan on starting today. The world's plenty bent out of shape already." She raised her voice so the cousins could hear her. "Stay close to the circle and hold the line here. I'm taking the fight to them." Without a backward glance, Shade launched into a run, straight toward the crawling, surging wave of warped creatures. Luckily, Shade knew how to kill them. Any blood wizard who dared walk the waste knew how to kill the twisted creatures who inhabited them. Faces, there are so many of them. Wielding her blades against her bare arms, she called the eastern face, Wind, and rose above the horde, riding currents of air. The leading line of creatures howled as a scent of her blood and magic reached them and slowed. The rest of the approaching wave bunching against them, overwhelming them. Like ants, the beast in the rear climbed over those stopped in front until they had created their own tower of shifting, crawling limbs and fangs and talons. Bunched as they were, there was no distinguishing one beast from the other. Held aloft by her power, Shade drew blood again and lifted her arms toward the still clear sky above her. Southern face this time, fire in its most awesome permutation. Snapping energy filled her, and she cast lightning down toward the writhing tower of creatures, desperate for her blood. It struck in a blast of blinding white.
Yeah, I did. There are clear nods to the mafia and religion, specifically the Catholic Church and the structure, but the influences that these leave on you that you wrote into the book.
What influences?
What influences did you have on you?
Well, actually, I was, when I first started coming up with the ideas for this book, which was a long time ago, I was obsessed with The Godfather. I mean, I thought the book, I'd never seen the book. I saw the movie for the first time in my 20s, and I was like, oh, this is a really good movie. I mean, that seemed old to me because it was out a long time. And my dad loved it. He loved Italy and The Godfather and all that stuff. And I read the book, and the book is awesome. I don't know if you've ever read the actual Godfather book, but there's so much in it, and I love of Sicily. The whole country was just, it has an incredible history. It's changed hands so many times. It's been conquered by a bunch of different other countries, yet the Sicilians themselves have remained pretty much the same. And there's all kinds of influences on them. And so I wanted that, like Malavita means underworld, actually, and it's an island nation, and it's basically based on Sicily, just the shape of it and the fact that it's been conquered so many times and just traded hands. And they're just like, at this point, they don't even care who rules them anymore, because they rule themselves their own way, basically. So that was one of them.
So is the idea of clan come from kind of the cohesion of the Sicilian culture?
The clans were another thing. It's just something I had read about these migrant workers in Mexico called golondrina, and they're called swallows because they go from place to place, working and things. And I was like, that's such a cool word. It was actually a song. I had on this international album of all these different music, and one of the songs is called Golondrina, Los Golondrinas, and I loved it. And I was like, what does that mean? So I looked it up, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. The idea of people who are just like travel from place to place. And so I developed the Golondrina after that, and they're basically sort of exiles, because they live in the wastes. They're not welcome in the Vales, where all the other people, live to be saved. So they made their home in the wastes, which is very dangerous. But there's a reason for it. They have to tend to the Karaz. They basically keep what little magic that's left in Malavita that's not tainted. They keep it pure and clean. So that's where that came.
What about language then? So Golondrina is Spanish for sparrow.
Spanish, yeah.
Karaz or other words. I actually haven't read the book. But
okay.
It sounds great. The reading is great, and there was clearly world building with language there. So
yeah, well, I picked a Karaz. I started the whole world as a desert type environment because I love deserts. I think it was something else I was reading at the time. Everything you read and see, it just comes into your work. And I learned about
she's interrupting people. She sounds.
They were irrigation lines called Karaz. They're called Karaz, and in some original drafts, I kept them as irrigation lines, like ancient, like terracotta lines that draw water, because water is so important in a place that's desert. But then I turned it into to magic, to lines of magic, like ley lines, which is like, it's in a lot of fantasy books. The idea that there's currents of magic throughout the whole world. I'm a little fuzzy.
I have a question. This is new, Dan, by the way.
Dan?
Hello. Lovely reading. So I noticed early on that somebody said trust your witch. So I guess witch is not a bad word in this world. And we'd like to tell us about that because that's a little unusual.
Well, Shade is called the Black Witch by her enemies, but she's basically, and she's a blood wizard like every other blood wizard. She just happens to be a woman, but it's the same kind of power. But it's a patriarchal society, so women don't openly practice magic, and they certainly don't walk around in the clothes that reveal. I didn't get a chance to describe her clothing in this scene, but she basically wears like a vest that leaves her arms clear and her chest clear, and she wears a short skirt, like a gladiator type skirt. So she's basically, women don't walk around, half naked essentially in this world. That's how all the male blood wizards walk around dressed. So she's like, screw it, I need to practice my magic. I'm going to walk around like these guys. So she took the name the Black Witch back and is basically like, fine, call me a witch. I'm a witch. The magic is based on blood magic and it's elemental magic. And I like the idea, like basically the world is tainted because when, blood magic in some books is always considered kind of evil, where you like kill someone or shed someone else's blood to get their power. So I made it so my wizards, to fight back against the taint, they change their magic so that they have to cut themselves. They make their own sacrifice of blood to get their power. And the gemstone blades, depending on the strength of the stone you wield, is how much power you have. So like quartz, which is kind of a very common stone, really easy to find. You can only access air, which for whatever reason I thought that was the weakest element or whatever. So like if you go higher in gemstones, like you go up to like amethyst and topaz and things like that, you can touch more faces, more elements. So and like really strong blades would be like ruby and emerald and sapphire, things like that. But Shade's blades are different. She carries obsidian, and because I just love obsidian, it's so cool. And I wanted her power. She can touch the wild power with obsidian because it's such a quickly formed gemstone. Like it's formed from volcanoes, and so it's like raw energy. And most wizards don't want to even try and wield it because it's too dangerous. So, but that's what she picked.
Cool.
She's cool. That's good for killing the White Walkers too.
We got time for about one more question from someone if they want to spit it out.
I do. I'm sorry. I really want to ask about Raiden and Dante. Having read it, Raiden's obviously who we as a reader, we start to root for him as we get to know him better. But Dante's her main squeeze. And I wondered which came first in your ideas for the book. Who was the first generated?
Actually, Raiden was always one of the first characters I ever thought about. I don't know. I wanted this kind of stranger in a strange land person who is special in his own right. And he became more and more special as I wrote him, as I developed the character. Dante's theory is very important for overall plot, and hopefully if I get the sequel done, his portion of the story is much broader, grander. Like his whole family history is very important to the overall story arc. But Raiden is my personal favorite. He's always been the important one for Shade especially, and their relationship, their friendship is I explore in more depth in the next book that's being written.
All right. Well, author Daley, thank you very much for coming out to play with us tonight. The reception begins as soon as I stop recording, and you guys can start swearing and drinking if you want. Thanks again for coming out, and I'm going to go off camera for a while I fix things out. So talk amongst yourself. Thanks, Sarah.